I will say amen to everything Dr. Willett just said, and actually that goes for everything Dr. Willett will say, too. The one thing that I would append to Walter's comments is he is the lead author of the Eat Lancet Commission report on diet, people, and the planet. And if you're not familiar with that, please get familiar with that. It maps out the boundaries we have to honor if we want a sustainable diet. What I would add to those great comments is that diet is at the confluence of everything that matters most. Personally, to the public, all of its intimate effects, all of its ecosystem effects, and it reverberates through current events. Coronavirus traces its origins to the flaws in a global food system. Incursions into fragile ecosystems, inequitable distributions of food, and a reliance on bushmeat in certain markets. That's probably what resulted in exposure. Everybody seems to think to bats, where this virus originated, not it goes, but essentially failure to honor the value of a plant-predominant food supply worldwide, maldistribution, inequities, failure to develop a fair and sustainable agricultural system is probably the reason for this current global public health emergency. It's certainly one of the key reasons. Diet, as Walter Willett indicated, is a crucial component of everything going on with the climate. Diet is the reason that we're burning down the Amazon so we can graze cattle to satisfy the global demand for beef. Diet is the reason that we're burning down the rainforests in Borneo so we can replace them with palm oil plantations. So on the one case, it's an appetite for beef. On the other, it's an appetite for processed food and palm oil. And then, of course, diet is the single leading cause of premature death in our culture. There was an op-ed in the New York Times on August 26th of 2019 entitled, "Our Food is Killing Too Many of Us." It was by Darish Mozafarian, Dean of Nutrition at Tufts, and Dan Glickman, former Secretary of Agriculture of the United States. They cite the evidence in that op-ed in the New York Times that diet is the single leading predictor variable of all-cause mortality and all major chronic disease. So it's the explanation for ravaging the planet. It is a clear and present danger for us and our families in terms of our health, and its effects reverberate from coronary artery disease to coronavirus. So I think on behalf of all of us, I thank all of you for having enough interest in the topic to be here on a Friday night.
If I can jump in. If I can jump in here, I agree with what you just said, Dr. Katz. The whole question concerning environment, cost of health care, all being related to what we choose to eat. I like your word confluence, I think you just said. I just had an opportunity. I've been in this business, as some of you know, as I said today, for 65 years, since my graduate studies. That's counting my graduate studies. Yeah, you and I are in the same boat. S is my senior by 3 months. In any case, I some years ago, I represent the field of nutrition, as I explained, and I have to tell you, being in the field of nutrition is tough. That concept of nutrition, which I define as the expression of food, sort of biochemical, metabolic, and so forth. That concept of nutrition I find very troubling in the sense that it's so confusing for so many people. Yet at the same time, the power of nutrition to actually express itself in a way of creating health is really, really impressive. At least that's what I've seen emerge over those years. And along the way, as I said, the whole idea of confusion struck me some years ago. About 20, 40, 50 years ago, I guess, But it's troubled me. Why is it so difficult for the public to get to know? It's not just the public. It's we in the professions as well. Why is it so difficult to really get a handle on what nutrition really means? I mean, all we need to look at is all the claims that are going on here and there in stores and everything else in the media to realize it's a troubling concept. And I would argue that until we can somehow convey what this means to the public, so everybody gets to know it better and in a simple way so they can actually use it in an effective way, that's what we need to do, is to sort of reach into some of these problems. I recently had an opportunity to think about writing a book again, which I've done. And this goes to that question concerning why are we so confused. I find that to be a fascinating subject. And so in the book, I've had the opportunity of going back and look at the history back to the 1700s, looking for the roots of why we think what we think. Look for the roots of why we are so troubled with this concept. Because nutrition as a science, and I don't believe my medical colleagues here would disagree with me, nutrition is not really effectively taught in medical schools. I think that's point number one. And I've often wondered why there's a discord between nutrition and, let's say, clinical practice. Quite a discord. The medical system doesn't, I think, appreciate it very much, partly because the professionals are not being taught the subject. But in history, and I'll leave it just at this, in history, I think I found something very exciting. And that is the way we sort of started thinking about how food works through nutrition, way back in the 1800s and on through that period. And there were two prominent ideas at that time. One was that that the whole idea of food being related to disease was said to be a constitutional effect. Constitutional effect. Really an interesting word. Whole body's involved, all that sort of thing. The alternative was the idea that disease is locally formed, locally treated, locally caused. So there are two concepts, the local theory of disease and the constitutional nature of disease. Once you get into exploring that particular concept, then you can see the roots of why we got to where we got now. Because we tend to think in such small little particles or small little ideas about the whole subject. Thank you. So we tend to think instead of think of the whole, we're always going for little bits and pieces to carve out some particular information for ourselves or maybe for some other purposes. And I just find this concept of nutrition now, I'm really sold on the idea. It is a holistic, and I like the word W in front of that word. It's a holistic effect, where it's infinitely complex, mechanistically, of course. But in reality, once you realize how to look at this system sense, in a system sense, we can get fairly simple ideas out of it. And that's where I get very excited about the whole food, plant-based diet. But because it is, after all, at the end of the day, it is our eating plants, not using livestock, for example, which is at the root of the environmental issues we all know, and cost of health care. It starts expanding like this, all starting with the idea of just really understanding what does that concept really mean. It's something more than this nutrient, that nutrient, this disease, that mechanism. It's the whole thing, working together in a very systematic way.
I'll follow up on...
Press the red buttons when you're done, so that you're not...
What's that?
Oh, yeah, and press it so it's not red. Thank you. Good.
I'll follow up on Dr. Campbell's comments, which I agree with everything that's been said here. The confusion about nutrition and the message that people get about nutrition. I think I am the only person here who came from a business background before I was involved in healthcare. And there's some value in that because you look at things through a different lens, like how much traction are you gaining in the marketplace, how are you convincing people, how many people are you convincing? And I think that we have a marketing problem we need to solve and a messaging problem that we need to work on. And I said last night that I think part of this is making sure that we focus on the things we have in common instead of the things that we differ on. And I think the other thing is figuring out how to take a cohesive message that is attractive to the public, making them want to jump on board. Now, we have the best story in the world. This is the best story in medicine, what we have right here. That you can, without any expense at all, in fact, your grocery bill will go down if you do this. You can go to the grocery store and make meals like you've always been doing. Nothing really changes much except the content of the food. And you can prevent and reverse diseases like heart disease and diabetes and some cancers and that sort of thing. If you could put this in a pill, I gave a lecture in Denmark last year that if I could put this information in the form of a pill, I'd have the biggest, richest drug company in the world. You would all want to invest in it, and so would everybody else. But the problem is the messaging, because people aren't getting the message. So I think what we have to do is really work on how we're conveying what we're conveying to the public in a way that makes them want to come in and join us. And I think that that involves targeting different populations of people with different messages. This is what you do when you're in business. Testing, messaging, working together actually for the purpose of not only furthering research, but furthering how we message this to the public so that we gain traction faster. Dr. Furman said last night that his estimate of the number of people who are actually eating an optimal diet is about 2.5% of the population. Not just a plant-based diet, but people who are really doing it right. I'll give you another statistic that might blow your mind even more, and that is that right now the data show that 85% of people who've adopted a plant-based diet did it for ethical reasons, not health reasons, which tells us the message isn't getting through. So when you have the best product in the world, think of it if it was a drug that we were trying to market, and you're not selling it to the public. Our problem is not that the research isn't right, and the problem isn't that what we're doing doesn't work, and the problem isn't that the results speak for themselves or the science is on our side. Our problem is messaging. And I think that we should be having conferences among ourselves to not debate the science, but to figure out how to sell this to the public. And I think that's maybe the most important thing we have to deal with.